Hey everyone, my name is Joe Salem, and I'm a member of Thirdera's Security and Risk team. Today, I'm joined by John Pawitsky and Philip Roach, also members of the team, and we're going to take you guys through the three newest features from ServiceNow's IRM as part of the Utah release. The first feature we'll look at is going to be issues and how they now have a many-to-many list, so you can have multiple risks or controls for your issues. The second feature we'll look at is the new confidentiality inheritance, which allows you to pass confidentiality from parent to children records. And then the third feature will be the new common control functionality within ServiceNow. With that said, I'll pass it over to you, John, to kind of take us through that first feature.
Thanks, Joe. So I'm on the issues workspace, and I'm going to just drill into my issues that are in the analyzed state. So I get a list of issues in this state. I'm going to open an issue here, and then I see the issue form and the information associated with this issue. I can get a quick overview of what state that issue is in. And I can see in particular, this one is in the analyzed state. One of the new functions in Utah that we're particularly interested in is the ability for us to associate multiple types of things to our issue. So in the past, we could only associate one entity, one control, one risk, one control objective, or one risk statement, or one policy. Going forward, we can associate multiple of these types of things, such as entity, controls, and policies. And it'll improve our ability to manage our issues and the associated data in our ecosystem related to those issues.
Yeah, thanks for showing that, John. I really think that's going to be super helpful for clients and kind of helping them map things across their IRM ecosystem. And really kind of the biggest thing that I think this will do for people is give them the ability to tie one singular issue to different records at the same time, right? So like you were mentioning, in the past, when it was a singular field, you could only associate an issue to a risk or a control or a policy. Now it can actually be tied to all three of those things. So it really helps you kind of broaden the relationships between your issues when it's appropriate, right? Sometimes your issues might affect a policy and a control and a risk, and we want to be able to capture that. So this is really, really cool.
Awesome. I completely agree with that. You know, since I'm on the issue, there's another feature in Utah that allows us to manage the record confidentiality, and it's also related to issue. And Phil, could you show us that in the tool?
Absolutely. Thank you, John. So as we are looking at the workspace, we're particularly looking at an issue record here. As John was saying, we're looking at the confidentiality flag. So that is the idea that we know that within organizations, they're going to have certain pieces of information or certain records or related records that are sensitive and can only be seen by a certain select group of people. The confidentiality flag allows a configuration record in the tool to basically say on a certain specific table, if somebody were to enter an issue and flag that confidentiality flag, that there is a record in there that tells us who, as long as they're populated in those fields, would be inserted into the confidentiality. The way the inheritance works is there is now a record, which is part of the new feature, that when you can now specify from relationships down from that parent record to other tables. So in this case, it's showing that you could have a policy exception related to an issue, and you would be able to basically flag that exception when that happens. So the way that looks in the tool is you have the details tab, and you have to have turned on confidentiality. So whenever I turn on the confidential flag, it's looking at the fields that are inside of here and saying, right, okay, based on the configuration record, this is what we'll do. The new feature is then to say if there is a related record to that it will honor that and push it down as well. There is some configuration that does need to be done, the business rules to make this work. There is also some thought around the idea of where you do it in the hierarchy. So doing it within the entity types and entities might cause a large demand on the system. So it's recommended to be done at certain levels. But I think this is a really nice new feature that basically takes away the manual interaction from the customer and allows this to be an automated feature.
Hey, Phil, I've had a lot of customers ask me about the visibility of data when they report risk events or they input information into an issue. Would this help with that?
Absolutely, John. So if you think that obviously, some risk information might be sensitive when it's about someone's personal information or sensitive organizational information, those record or different record types within IRM would be able to have that same confidentiality. So if an organization says beforehand that this group and these people are responsible for items of these types, then they would be able to use this functionality to help them out with that.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's really cool. And I guess kind of what I'm hearing there is that can be a huge time saver if you're using confidentiality, right? Like if you've got issues, 4 or 5 issues that all need to be confidentiality, and each of those has a bunch of subtasks or remediation tasks. This feature would allow you to just flag your issues as confidential, and the system's going to automatically flag those related remediation tasks, for example, as confidential, right?
Exactly. And from an implementation perspective, we work with a lot of clients that have a scenario where ended up a customization of changing ACLs to allow only certain people to potentially see fields. So it's taking away the technical debt and complexity of trying to establish a system like this when it isn't already there. So I think there's definitely some advantages as well to having a cleaner configuration. So with that being said, we also going to take a look at the common controls feature with Joe, who's going to take us through that now.
Yeah, thanks, Phil. So here on the screen, I've actually pulled up a control within our compliance workspace. And the new feature within Utah is actually going to allow us to kind of have this function field on our controls where we can set them as either a common or a standard control. And we actually do that through an action here in the workspace. You can see I can convert this control back to standard or, vice versa if it was standard. And once I make that conversion from standard to common, we're actually going to see a couple of new related lists appear here in the workspace. And that's going to say Reliant entities and Reliant entity types. And what that effectively means is when a control is common, anything that is reliant on that control will inherit its status. So for example, the record I have up on the screen is about multi-factor authentication in the system. And what I've defined is I've said that when I attest that Okta here is compliant, right, with my multi-factor authentication control, all of these systems that rely on Okta are going to take that compliance score. So now I don't have to go in and attest that same thing for all of these controls. They're just going to inherit it. That works the same way with entity types. So for example, if I wanted to apply that compliant status to a whole type of things, I can do that. And I have an example just to kind of show you what that might look like. Here we've got a control for least privilege, and we're basically saying that that should apply to all of our Windows servers. So I set that as my entity type. And now when I attest this IT control, all of those servers that are Reliant are going to inherit the status and really save me from having to attest all of those controls against the servers.
Yeah, Joe, I think that's really good from an implementation perspective, because I think a lot of organizations that we work with specify the need to have a lot of things answered by one item. So it takes away a lot of manpower needs as well. When you say you don't have to attest to 56 controls, you can just do it once, right? You can use the common control to have a big impact and saving for that time. So
yeah, absolutely.
This is great.
Yeah, and I guess the other thing that makes me think of, just to kind of give one more point here, we don't actually create control records for all of these things. So it does actually help you keep your control library smaller and more tailored, right? You can still use these things in similar ways as controls, but now I wouldn't necessarily need 56 controls. All of these things are just inheriting status from IT. So to your point, it really is going to help customers kind of consolidate their compliance experience within ServiceNow.
Absolutely. I think it also helps with the attestation grouping, which is how this kind of would have been done before. So instead of having a really, really long, complicated assessment for multiple users, you could just do it that once, which I think is definitely good.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it kind of seems like test once, solve for many, right? So using
yes,
automation. Absolutely. All right, cool. That's awesome, Joe.
Yeah. Well, thanks everyone for tuning in with us today. That kind of takes us through the 3 newest features in ServiceNow IRM with the Utah release. We appreciate you hanging in there with us today. Keep an eye out for additional content on this channel. If you have any questions about anything we showed today, feel free to reach out to Thirdera for some more information. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.
Thank you all.